Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. So this is actually going to be a very simple two-card kind of mail day, mail week kind of video, but there's going to be a fair bit of a story time element with the second card. So we're definitely going to chat on that a little bit. Specifically about the significance of it and kind of the reason I was chasing after it. I already alluded to it on my Instagram post that I made about it, but I also said I would make a video talking about it a little bit more depth and a little bit more discussion. Now, before I get to that, why don't I start off with the first card of the two? And this is from 2020, the Cup, and this is actually in the Jake Ottinger. I wanted to pick up one of these, and this was a nice opportunity to have a nice autograph patch piece. Now, since it is 2020, these are pretty much player worn as far as these are concerned. It's a decent enough patch piece to go along with it. On-card auto, number 25 with the slightly different numbering, which if memory serves me, I think means they use the facility, I want to say in Italy. I know there's a, basically an overseas facility they use to print some of this stuff. So this is the gold version, patch autograph. Very nice card. Now, this is one of those things where I'm not really building a full-fledged PC of Ottinger, but it's one of those things where for the current team, I wanted to have something to represent it in addition to obviously the Jamie Benn collection that I have been working on for some time. And I'll keep on collecting the Jamie Benn cards as more of a focus, but I have been enjoying the fact that they've at least got a goaltender for the current day, the current time period, and it's been nice to have, and hopefully, some success follows them down the road. They are in the playoffs this year, so I'm crossing my fingers and hoping for the best. The series is tied 1-1 as I'm recording this, so Game 3 is going to be happening tonight, later on as I'm recording this on Saturday. So crossing my fingers for another good performance by the team. Love to go up 2-1 on Colorado. I'm not banking on anything specifically. I'm kind of enjoying the ride for this particular year, and hopefully the team continues to develop. It would be nice, though, to see if they could have some success this season. The West is going to be very tough, but they do have a chance, at least as long as they're men in the tournament. So nonetheless, I'll enjoy this particular playoff ride, however far it goes. Now for the second card, we're going to stick with the Dallas Star theme, but this one is kind of a 90s Grail is kind of the way that I phrased it, kind of in the Instagram. And the reason I did that is because this is one of the key cards from the 90s section of the Modano collection, and I'll update the Modano count at the end as well, that I had been chasing for a very long time. But before I get into it, and if you've seen the Instagram post, you already know exactly what I'm going to talk about. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to show you some other cards, because I had a question on the live stream this past Friday of what kind of qualifies. I'm not going to give you a top 5, but I do want to show you a couple of cards that kind of represent kind of that top tier of the Modano collecting pyramid, so to speak. Now, if you are a person who collects hockey players from the 90s, probably if they've been on a fair number of the sets, there's a good chance they have an equivalent to a lot of these cards or a lot of these inserts that I'm going to show you. And I'll give you a little background on some of these, and then we'll talk about the card that I actually added to the collection. Now, first one here is actually 97-98. It is Upper Deck, 6 Sense Wizards. I've showcased this card before a number of times. It is probably one of my favorites from the late 90s period. It's right up there at the very top. There's another card that I'm going to show in a minute that probably a lot of folks would put ahead of it, but I do like the shine, especially with that kind of star pattern in the foil. And it's been used a lot in the 90s. If you go check out, there's a lot of different products that use this. Be a Player in the early days used this for one of their nicer autograph variants. Obviously in basketball and in baseball and some of them, you'll see this kind of foil pattern, but it is a really, really nice one. And this one is numbered to 100. So one pattern you'll notice with a lot of the 90s stuff is that numbered to 100 and numbered to 25 and numbered to 50. Those ones hold a lot more weight because there just weren't as many numbered parallels as there are now, obviously. And the way the products are structured, some of the stuff is tougher than even those print runs would lead you to believe. These have definitely escalated a lot in price. And that's going to be a reoccurring theme with some of the ones I'm going to show you that are tougher. So if you're talking 90s hockey, there's a lot of these that I'm going to show you that are definitely probably at the top of want lists for some player collectors, depending on who it is they're chasing. Second one here kind of falls under the exact same category for the same kind of reason. And on the surface, you wouldn't think so, but it's something that really is a challenge, especially again for folks in that era. Series 98-99, UD Choice, and this is the gold StarQuest. Number to 100, again, same kind of thing. So you have 4 levels of the StarQuest, so this is a parallel of one of the inserts. It is a very tough card to find. Now, UD Choice was actually a low-end brand, for those of you who may not be familiar. And this particular year was interesting because it had 2 different low-level brands that have a card related to it that is a tougher pull and a tougher to find. So you've got StarQuest coming from the UD Choice brand, and then you also had Upper Deck MVP. And Upper Deck MVP is where you could find those superscripts. This one has this one in addition to having the Prime Choice Reserve. So UD Choice has 2 kind of tougher cards if you're a 90s hockey collector. And they did play this in some of the other sports as well. I think you can see this in baseball, the same kind of pattern and design. And maybe football as well. I know they have definitely had a StarQuest Gold like this, but definitely these are tough to come by. This is one that I was able to get early on, in the early days of kind of my collecting, and I was able to find this on a table at the expo many, many years ago for a lot less than it would cost today. And that doesn't say it isn't without flaws, because there's definitely some scratches right there on top of the black piece. But nonetheless, I've had this one in the collection a very long time. There were a lot of folks that have built the set back then, so a lot of these dried up. Now, the other part that's kind of tricky about this one, and the reason I wanted to mention it, is because since it is a low-end brand, you would think, oh man, card of 100, low-end brand, these should be pretty easy. Well, reality is you could probably open up a case of them and you might be lucky to find one. It has a lot of the same problems that you had with a lot of the early Donruss Elites. And it was like, well, this stuff's cheap. Yep, but you weren't pulling these in every box or every other box or even 10 boxes or 20 boxes. It was very tough to come by and pull any of them. And I think, if memory serves me, it was a 30-card player checklist. So you had all the different levels, but then for the golds, you have a 30-player checklist, 100 cards each. So there's about 3,000 of these floating around. And nonetheless, these have proven to be pretty tough to find, and the prices have definitely escalated. Go check out what one of the Gretzky's sells for, and that'll give you kind of an idea. Next one here is another 90s toughie. It is another parallel, but it is also one that is more than meets the eye. I've talked about it a little bit before, but I'll touch on it here again. Now, this one is the 97-98 Zenith Z Gold. Now, ignore the scratches on there. I'm going to have to replace the holder. But nonetheless, the Zenith Z Gold, and this one is one that I was definitely also chasing for a long time. So numbered to 100, third straight one of those. And the tough part about these ones really came down to this. 97-98 Zenith. This was the Dare to Tear year. A lot of little interesting gimmicks that Pinnacle was using towards the end of its time. This was the last year of Pinnacle, and this was one of the more interesting ones. They did also use this in some other sports. Now, the tricky part about this one is that when you pulled the boxes of these, you ended up pulling, I think it was 3 5x7 cards. And the Dare to Tear piece is that the small cards, the regular size trading cards, were included inside of the big 5x7. So the question was, do you cut open the big card in order to get the small one? And you could pull a base card, you could pull an insert, you could pull a parallel like this. So you had the base card, the Z Silver, and the Z Gold. And the Z Golds being out of 100 were the toughest ones. So the problem with this one is that while obviously people pulled the different cards, they would be inside of the 5x7s. So if somebody built a set of 5x7s that are uncut, which was not unusual back then, there could be several of these that were pulled out of packs that are sitting there inside of one of the big 5x7s, never to see the light of day. So maybe numbered to 100, but the amount of them that are actually floating out there are probably comfortably less than 100, especially for certain players. A lot of that one was really luck of the draw, and it's hard to say exactly how many of them saw the light of day. And I bet you didn't think you were getting a whole 90s hockey card rundown with this one, but it is pertinent to what I'm saying. Like I said, it is a story time thing, and I wanted to make sure that I talked about it because all of these cards I consider to be part of kind of my tier 1, so to speak. And the card that I ended up picking up definitely qualifies, and I wanted to make sure that I gave the context of that. That said, I will speed up a little bit. I don't want to spend too much time explaining every single one of these as we get into the card that I picked up. So quickly, the next two are going to be together, but separate at the same time. 97-98, Pinnacle Totally Certified. We've got the Platinum Gold, and then the big one here. We've got the Gold Mirror Platinum, or Mirror Platinum, and the gold version there. Now you can check it out. This is already a pretty cool card. In and of itself, that's pretty sweet, especially with the shine and kind of the new effects kind of thing going on. And that one is actually numbered to 69. Make your jokes. But what's interesting is that you also had the parallel version of that. So you already had a couple of different levels, but this is the Mirror Platinum Gold. And you can see right there, just looking at it, the shine on this is absolutely insane. So what I would say, for a lot of folks, especially 90s hockey collectors, this would qualify as kind of your top tier Grail card. All of these are tier 1 to me, but yes, I could definitely see this one being as one of the favorites. Like I said, the Sixth Sense Wizard to me is actually my favorite, but this one could certainly be 1A or right up against it. So that is actually a fantastic card, and this one is numbered to 30. And there was a difference in numbering between the skaters and the goaltenders. But nonetheless, there you go. You can see the incredible shine on that one. So these ones are obviously top tier. And a lot of these cards that I'm showing you were probably picked up in the last 5 years. I've been collecting Modanos since 95. So next year will be 30 years collecting the player as part of my collection. But the thing is that in the last 5 years or so, with some of these coming out of the woodwork, that's what's made it possible to really fill in a lot of those 90s grails. That's why the list kept getting narrower and narrower and smaller. It became even more prevalent that it was going to be really tough to get a couple of the last ones. And that's what made things really interesting. All right, a couple more, and then we'll get into the actual pickup itself. If you've been hanging in there, I appreciate it. And I'd be curious if you are hanging in there. I'd love to get a comment if you want to tell me which one is your favorite. Or if you have another favorite in the 90s that maybe I did mention that you wanted to bring up. Next one here is actually, I think, 98-99. This is from the Black Diamond, and it is the winning formula. But it is the winning formula Platinum. Now, these are sneaky tough. And we got a train. These are actually very sneaky in how tough they are. Now, it's one of those things, like it's a nice looking card, but not a big deal. But obviously, you can see glaring right there is the print number. That is numbered to 21. Now, because they called it winning formula, the numbering was actually based on a certain statistic for each player, and that is what would determine what the actual numbering was. So for the year before, Modano scored 21 goals. I believe it was an injury-filled year, and it resulted in a lower goal count, which also reduced the print run of this. And obviously that's the last one of the print run. So this one is one of those ones where, honestly, they don't come up very often, especially the Platinums. And if you can get your hands on one, that's fantastic. But this was definitely a key piece that I added. But a little bit sneaky because not a lot of people even think about this one. Next one here, I guess I'm kind of contractually obligated. A lot of my preference in the 90s is really the parallels and inserts and things like that. You don't really think about memorabilia too much. Although the whole game jersey concept started in the 90s, I don't mention very often, but I do feel it would be appropriate, at least to mention one and showcase one. I believe this year is 99-2000, memory serves me. I think it was fairly early on, and I believe this was the first year of the patch. So there's the game jersey patch. Very nice piece there, and this one's a game-worn jersey patch from Modano. And these ones, I believe, for this year, because they changed the ratios over time, the game jerseys were originally 1 in 2,500 packs, which is already very tough. And then I believe the early patches were 1 in 7,500 packs. Don't completely quote me on that. You can fact check me on that one. But I believe it was something like that. So these were extremely difficult, definitely tough to come by. And some of the high-end collectors definitely went after it and tried to build sets of these. And definitely a tricky and difficult chase. So these days, just to have one of these is great. And it was definitely a big addition to the collection when I picked this one up. And this one's a late 90s staple if you could get, when patches meant a little bit more. Obviously, you'd eventually get to shields and things like that. But once you start doing something enough times, it loses a little bit of its luster. This is when the game patch was definitely still right at the top of the food chain as far as chases for people on the hockey side. So before the grand finale and the reveal, we'll do one more here, and that's going to be 98-99 Bowman's Best, because in hockey there wasn't a very long run of Bowman, and we'll talk about the Atomic Refractor. So you got to have an Atomic Refractor, definitely one that is a staple. So the Atomic Refractor there is numbered to 100. Again, out of 100 in the 90s, tough cards, and you've got the nice cracked ice kind of design with the Atomic Refractor. Beautiful looking cards. These are fantastic, and they've, again, like some of these other ones that I've shown, they've escalated quite a bit as the 90s rolled through. Now, one quick kind of a little honorable mention. I didn't want to pull it out of the Z-Folio because I actually keep it with the other ones, believe it or not. One of the ones that I would kind of mention is the Donruss limited exposure, especially the Star Factor. If your player's in one of the Star Factors, I'll see if I can pull up an image of one that I've taken in the past. But if you've got the Star Factor, we don't know exactly what the print run is on that one. That was more of a stated print run. But the theory is somewhere, the word out there is that it's somewhere in the range of about 25 cards. Definitely a major tough one. And if you like your shine, that one is a fantastic one as far as shine is concerned. And definitely a top tier piece, I would say, for the 90s. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that one. Again, I didn't want to pull out of the Z-Folio. Okay, so the entire purpose of going through all that stuff and kind of talking through all those 90s cards was because I wanted to give some context to how long I've been doing this and how many of the big cards that I've had on that want list I've been chipping away at. So as it stands right now, I've got 70 cards left in the later portion of the 90s. I broke up my checklist into about 5-year pieces. And the first 5 years of Modano, I'm down to 8 cards that I need. So that checklist is very small. But from 95 to about 99-2000, that section of it is 770 cards or so. I'm down to 70. So I think I've got 91% of the cards that I can have on that one. So that checklist is getting narrower and narrower. And most of the stuff that I'm missing is honestly obscure stuff. There are a few really tough parallels, and I don't consider them to be tier 1 because they're kind of parallels of parallels. They're a little bit more awkward than they are anything else, but I would love to have them. But it's one of those things where they're not ones that I've been consistently chasing after with constant save searches, checking every single day. And it's not an exaggeration. This card I'm about to show you here, I have had it on a save search probably for about 3 or 4 years, checking every single day, hoping that that'll be the day that it would actually show up and that I'll be able to add it. And people collected this set back then, and it was one of those things where the singles just don't come up that often, but when they do, it tends to be certain cluster. There's been a lot of Sergei Fedorovs that I've seen. There's been even some Gretzky's. But it's one of those things where Modano, for whatever reason, I just wasn't seeing it. And a lot of times, if you do see them show up, they'll show up in little clusters where somebody breaks up a set or gets a small group lot of them, and then usually sells them all at once as far as a couple of groups. So you'll see 3 or 4 of them pop up at the same time. And that's kind of what happened with this one. I think it was 4 that came up at the same time, but it included the Modano, and that's what I was interested in came after. And that's what I was interested in. So, without any further ado, 96-97, Black Diamond, Run for the Cup. So you can see a little bit better. I did show off on the live stream a little bit, but you can see it is the acetate. It's got the little see-through there. And you've got the image of the player to go along with another image in the front for an action shot. Now you think, really, it's not that crazy a thing. It's a nice looking card, no doubt, but it's kind of just a gold foil kind of thing. It's got a little texture to it, which is cool. It's got the acetate, obviously, which is neat. Now, 96, 97 was not a cheap brand at that time for Black Diamond. And this was the year that gave you the Patrick Marleau and the Joe Thornton rookie, which were part of a 3-tiered base set design. And what I mean by that is, so this year, Black Diamond was the first year Black Diamond came into hockey, and it was that you had a certain amount of cards, I forget the exact number, but there's your single diamond, then you had your double diamond, and then you had your triple diamond. And they were all part of the base set, but it was tiered as you went along from single, double to triple, with triple being the toughest. And with having 2 sought-after rookies there, the triple diamond meant that they were relatively short-printed compared to a single or double diamond, and you had some star players. Modano has a triple diamond as well. And then you also had the gold version of all of those. So a triple diamond, say, for example, a Patrick Marleau or Joe Thornton would have gone for massive money. But even some of the big veterans, so like a Gretzky in the triple diamond, is a massive card. And I believe it was because the standard print run, I want to say, was 50 for the gold. All right, so quick edit. I wanted to make sure I double check that. So Modano was in the set, did have a gold version, but he was in the double diamond, which is that he wasn't one of the ones with the standard print run. It was slightly short printed, but not as crazy. But for the Gretzky and all the ones that made it in the triple diamond, and you had the gold version of that, it was a standard print run of 50. So that is correct. Now, as far as the inserts are concerned, this was the big chase. Run for the Cup, obviously, acetate, kind of an interesting card. And this one, as a lot of the ones that I just showed you, numbered to 100, hand numbered to 100. And this is one of those cases. So obviously you can see the image a little bit better there. And you got the little write-up going with it. Really what it comes down to is this. This was a slightly higher end set. I don't remember exactly where it fell in the pecking order, but it was definitely not a low end set. And you had already a big chase in it with the rookies. So you've got all that going for it. But then on top of everything else, you've got the fact that you don't get one per box. You don't probably get one per 2 boxes. I couldn't even imagine what the ratio was on it, but it was tough enough that in order to make it work, you had yourself a bit of a chase going for you. So now you combine that and you take it with a checklist of 20 players. So you've got 100 per, that's 2,000 total cards. So it's even less print run, even compared to the StarQuest Gold that I already showed you a little earlier. And you've got all these players that are in a higher end brand. So the Upper Deck Choice was a low end brand, but this one is actually a higher end brand, but you've got even less cards to go after. And it made a situation where you had a lot of folks that at the time were trying to build the set. So you've got relatively low numbered, again, 90s out of 100 is tough. You combine that with the checklist where a lot of player collectors were in on it. You have Gretzky, you've got Gretzky, Waugh, Yzerman, you've even got a Lemieux in there. So you've got obviously top tier players included in it. So you've got the individual player collectors to go along with the set collectors, to go along with people that just were happy if they managed to pull one and just wanted to keep it for their collection because it was a tough card. And that all kind of combines to make it a very difficult card to come by. So this one really was almost 30 years in the making, trying to get my hands on one of these, checking all the time. So it was great when this one came up. We were able to come to a deal that I was happy with. I paid a lot more for it than I definitely would have back in the day. Also a lot more for it than I would have wanted to back in the day. But it was just great to be able to knock this one off the checklist. So I've already rambled enough. I've given you a background on it and everything, but I'll kind of conclude with this. This one was, I kind of alluded to it, but this is kind of an end of an era as far as the checklist is concerned. Not because I'm done, because like I said, I've still got about 70 cards left on that checklist. Although I do have a few that I have managed to pick up. One of them is sitting at ComC, and another one I think will be en route. So I am slowly chipping away at it. There are still a few easier, I'm going to put in quotation marks, cards in that late 90s checklist. But some of those are kind of because they're more obscure than anything else. Some of them I may even still have to do a little bit more research on because honestly, I know of them or conceptually what they are. But the way they were released and exactly how many are out there and everything is kind of vague. But when it comes to the ones that I knew were scarce or the ones that I knew I had been chasing after this entire time, these ones kind of qualify at the top end of that. The other ones also are kind of parallels of parallels. So I gave you the example of that whole thing with the winning formula card. That's a situation where you've got an insert and then it's kind of a parallel of it. And there's a couple of levels of it. Same thing happened in 98, 99 Upper Deck with Quantums. You've actually got 3 levels of Quantums. Quantum 3 is a 1 of 1, so I don't even count that as part of the checklist. But Quantum 2 for the Fantastic Finishers is the last one that I need for that. That's numbered to 25. That's a very tough card. Superscripts are numbered to 25. I still need one more in the 90s for that. So stuff like that is kind of obvious just because it's a lower numbered card. It's a very tough one to come by. It'll probably cost me a little bit, but it's not on kind of my tier 1 cachet. It's probably like a tier 2, but still, definitely a card that I want to chase after. I still want to work on that checklist. But it's kind of downhill from here. It's one of those things where I would love to come across those. I'm sure at some point I will. But it is kind of satisfying to have one of those major ones that I had been doing the save search for so long, to have that in the 96, 97 run for the Cup. So that one, I'm going to enjoy this little plateau for a little while. Again, I'll still be looking out there to try to find some of these other ones and see if I can get that checklist down. But I think at this point, especially considering where I started all those years ago, it's been kind of fun to be able to sit there and say, like, yeah, I've accomplished and picked up a lot of the cards that I really wanted to have back then. And, you know, just the ones that'll be coming forward after that will be just icing on the cake. So that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed a couple of pickups and a little showcase. I'll do a quick update to the Modano count. Makes it easy because really I only added one this time around. So now we're sitting at 2,640 different. No change in the autographs, 327. So that's a little mini goal that I keep going forward with. And then 647 memorabilia cards for Modano. So that'll be one where I'll get close to 650 shortly. Working on picking up some more things. Starting to accumulate a couple of things to ship my cards, but it'll be a while before I pick that up. And a couple of things at ComC. One of the cards at ComC actually will be kind of a fun one. It also fits in the late 90s checklist, but it's a little bit more of, again, more obscure rather than necessarily rare, but I think it'll be a fun one to talk about when I get that one in hand. But that'll be some point down the road. So that's it for this one. Hopefully you liked it. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much, and we'll catch you in the next one.